Elle owned an Airbnb house for several years. I stopped due to the stress of keeping up with it as well as maintaining my actual job. The benefits of using Airbnb instead of renting the place out like you normally would is that you would have the chance to make a lot more money if your house gets booked a lot, being in a relatively high traffic area for vacations. Airbnb was a great option for us. My wife and I were excited in the beginning, but it got more demanding as more people booked the house we needed to keep everything on schedule and hire cleaning services after the first customers left, and before the next ones came, as well as be sure to respond to their messages and emails in a timely manner. But things were going well for a couple years before we had what we thought was a young couple staying at the house. Just like every other time when they arrived, I texted them the unlock code for the door. I almost never actually see the customers after they let me know that they were inside and everything was good. I sat back and relaxed for the rest of my day off. I should also mention that I almost never even talked to the customers, more than just a couple texts. Usually they text me when they get there and when they leave, and sometimes an occasional question about the house, but that's usually it. But as 9 o'clock came around and I was just about to get ready for bed, I got a text from the young man staying at the house. It was short saying he was going to call me in a minute, and then a minute later he called. I already had a bad feeling when I saw the text, but what he said still surprised me. He said that the water wasn't working in the house. Of course I apologized, though I didn't understand how that could be possible. But living in a house without water is unacceptable. So I knew I had to get it fixed. Immediately asked if I could come check it out really quick so that I could have someone come in the morning to fix it. He agreed, being very polite about the whole thing, and I drove over there a few minutes later. Pulling into the driveway, I noticed 2 cars at the time. This wasn't necessarily a red flag, but more just an odd thing I noticed because they were apparently a young couple on vacation for a single night, so I didn't understand why they would rent 2 separate cars. I thought someone must be visiting them, which actually isn't allowed, but I didn't mind so much. I walked up to the front door and knocked before entering the code and walking inside. It was very quiet. I expected them to be waiting for me, but they weren't anywhere that I could see. One probably should have looked around for them first, but I was tired and just wanted to get this over with. The first thing I wanted to check was the main water valve to make sure there wasn't a leak or a flood. So I went down to the basement and over to the valve. Everything seemed normal. No water anywhere or signs of damage. I was confused. But then I fiddled with the valve and immediately heard water start rushing again. I turned it more, realizing it had been completely shut off manually. I stayed in the basement for another minute trying to understand why this was done before I started to get a really uncomfortable feeling. Especially since I didn't even see the people when I walked inside. Lust couldn't see how it could have been anyone other than them who turned off the water, which meant they were trying to get me to come over on purpose, or maybe give them a discount on their stay for the inconvenience. I decided I was going to leave and get my car, then try calling them back just to be safe. I got up and started walking towards the stairs until I heard the basement door open, followed by multiple sets of footsteps walking down. When they got to the bottom, 3 men stood there. "Is it fixed?" one of them said, sounding like the same man I talked to on the phone, though all of these men were much older than the young man that I thought was staying at the house. I told him it should be working now and that the valve must have just tightened on its own. I was trying not to point any blame since the whole thing was making me so uncomfortable. I just wanted to get out of that basement and away from these guys. They all just kind of stood there looking at me, not saying anything after that. "Well, let me know if you need anything else," I said. Walking between them, trying to get to the stairs, they still just stood there watching me walk around them. But as I went past the 3rd guy closest to the stairs, I spotted a gun shoved in the back of his pants. It made me freak out a little, and I rushed a bit quicker up the stairs, but they didn't follow. They stayed in the basement as I quickly walked out the door and drove away. When I got home, I woke up my wife and told her what had happened. She convinced me to call the police to check up on them. They weren't the people we thought were staying there, and the situation was strange, so it felt justified. I think we waited 20 minutes before a call came from an officer claiming nobody seemed to be home and that he may need me to open the door. I gave him the code instead, and he called back another 20 minutes later saying that there was no signs of anyone still being there the next day, We found out the card the man paid with was stolen, and after looking around the house, they had stolen some expensive decorations and appliances as well. I guess there never actually was a young couple either. The one thing that was left unexplained was their whole plan with the water not working. I think they either wanted me to not charge them for their stay so that hopefully they could use the stolen card for longer, or they were planning on robbing me at gunpoint. But then that makes me question why they didn't 3 dangerous, unidentified men blocking my exit in the basement after leading me into a trap, and they just let me go. It doesn't make sense to me. But after that, I never went to the house while customers were home, and a few months later we stopped using Airbnb and just put the house up for rent.